Why do we hear so much about racism these days? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. True enough, this country saw a lot of racism in the 1950s, but by the end of the century, the perception of it had declined, so that people didn't tend to think about it. That is, until the presidency of Barack Obama. Yesterday evening, a now prominent writer, Twitter influencer, shared the likely reason. Liberal newspapers blowing it out of proportion. Or do they have another, more ominous motive? Before I describe this thread, or these threads, plural, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which reads, Pravda, better than CNN. This isn't about CNN alone. It is about all legacy media behaving badly. When they do that, I'm going to make just such a comparison. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, do you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. Now, once again, meet Kaneko the Great, who gave Google the Twitter treatment back in February. Now he turns his attention to America's largest daily newspapers. He charges that they have sharply increased their use of the word racism and phrases containing it, and words derived from it. They also are selectively mentioning the race of those accused of murder, depending on the race of suspect and victim. Beginning at 4:07 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday, Kaneko dropped a 3-tweet thread. He based that on an article that appeared in April of last year in the Washington Free Beacon. I have a link in the description to that article. Here is how Kaneko the Great excerpted it. Quote, based on a study of 1,100 articles from 6 major newspapers between 2019 and 2021, the media is 4 times more likely to mention the race of white murderers as compared to black murderers. When race is mentioned, white murderers' race is mentioned in articles earlier than black murderers. White murderers are mentioned within the first 15% of the article, whereas black murderers are mentioned after at least 60%. After George Floyd's murder, the media disparity between mentioning the race of white and black murderers widened. Close quote. Right here he puts in a graph showing that mentions of black murderers got cut in half, while mentions of white murderers doubled. The 6 papers in the study were the Chicago Tribune, Los Angeles Times, New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, San Francisco Chronicle, and Minneapolis Star Tribune. Then at 6:51 p.m. Eastern Time, he dropped another thread. This one based on an article that appeared in The Tablet shortly before the election of 2020. In August of 2020, in fact. Zach Goldberg, then a graduate student at Georgia State University, wrote the article and, in fact, cited more examples. But here is just the text that Kaneko quoted. Begin. Between 2011 and 2019, the New York Times and the Washington Post increased their usage of the words racist, racists, plural, and racism by over 700% and nearly 1,000% respectively. In 2011, just 35% of white liberals thought racism in the United States was a big problem, according to national polling. By 2015, this figure had ballooned to 61%, and further still to 77% in 2017. In 2006, 45% of white Democrats and 41% of white Republicans knew someone they considered racist. By 2015, this increased to 64% for white Democrats, but remained 41% for white Republicans. Notably, the percentage decreased among black and Hispanic Democrats during the same period. Between 2013 and 2019, the New York Times and the Washington Post increased their usage of the terms systemic racism, structural racism, and institutional racism by roughly 1,000%. Between 2013 and 2019, the New York Times and the Washington Post increased their usage of white privilege and racial privilege by 1,200% and nearly 1,500%, respectively. What the data presented here suggests is that editorial decisions made over the last decade at some of the most powerful media outlets in the world about what kind of language to use and what kind of stories merited coverage when it came to race. Whatever the intention and level of forethought behind such decisions, has stoked a revival of racial consciousness among their readers, intentionally or not, by introducing and then constantly repeating a set of keywords and concepts. Publications like the New York Times have helped normalize among their readership the belief that color is the defining attribute of other human beings. For those who adopt this singular focus on race, a racialized view of the world becomes a baseline test of political loyalty. The same media institutions that have promoted revanchist identitarianism and the radical transformation of American society along racial lines could instead have focused their attention and influence on improving the quality of life for all. Stop right there. What is this word revanchist? Before I begin, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. You feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Electing gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, that word revanchist comes from the French word revanche, meaning exactly what it sounds like, revenge. It's what moved the French to dive headlong into the First World War. They wanted their territories of Alsace and Lorraine back, the territories they lost in the Franco-Prussian War of 1873. A revanchiste was someone campaigning actively for the French to take their revenge. Today, that word stands for a revenge way of thinking, or for someone who thinks that way. Moving on. Working to ensure that Americans of any background aren't unjustly victimized by the police and have access to quality health care, schools, and affordable housing doesn't require the promotion of a race consciousness that divides society into oppressed and privileged color categories. To the contrary, it requires that we de-emphasize these categories and units in pursuit of common interests. This may not suit the media's prerogatives, and it may not appeal to activists whose desire for cultural recognition trumps their devotion to material progress. but it does offer the potential benefit of improving the lives of ordinary Americans. End of thread. Reaction has been mostly positive, with replies scattered throughout these threads. One user brought up an appearance by Morgan Freeman on CBS 60 Minutes, in which he decried Black History Month. In fact, Freeman asked correspondent Mike Wallace, "Are you going to relegate my history to a month? What about yours?" I have a link in the description to the tweet embedding that video, and also to the original video from YouTube. I also have a link to another tweet by this same user, showing a picture of Morgan Freeman from AZ Quotes, quoting him as saying, "How are we going to get rid of racism? Stop talking about it." Close quote. In fact, I have the link in the description so you can see for yourselves. Sorry, Snows, you'll not disprove it this time. When another user thanked Kanakoa for putting the issue into perspective, Kanakoa answered with his own tweet, to which I have the link. He says, quote, "It's no coincidence that the perception of racial division increased after the Occupy Wall Street movement alongside the rise of populism," close quote. And with a cartoon of a man sitting in a tall chair, a typical big boss chair, with an Occupy Wall Street demonstration happening outside his window. He's on the telephone and giving this order: "Introduce them to identity politics." Still another user produced another segment, again featuring Morgan Freeman. Now, here he tells Don Lemon exactly what he told Mike Wallace: "Keep talking about racism and it will continue." I have the link in the description. You can play it for yourselves. So, why are so many in the legacy media talking about racism so often? And why the New York Times and the Washington Post more than any others? Kanakoa might not want to accuse them outright of intentionally increasing racial tension, but in recent years, editors seem to be letting ideology, not profits, long-term or short, drive their decisions. Understand, the source material of the second thread came out just prior to the election. So are we dealing with election interference by the Times and the Post? The first thread is more concerning because it describes things happening now. Remember that article in the Washington Free Beacon? Guess what? Everything you can read in the Beacon and the tablet is still happening. Worse, crime has significantly worsened, especially in America's largest cities. This is partly due to prosecutors who won't prosecute, but have these organs decided deliberately to provoke the attitudes that are leading to some of this crime? Well, that's something that every one of these editors will have to answer for himself. Before I get to my links, I want to shout out to Volkmar Becher, who drew the excellent line art portrait of Morgan Freeman that I selected and incorporated into the thumbnail for this video. He even marked it as dedicated to the public domain. Good for you, Volkmar, because not only is Morgan Freeman one of the finest actors who ever stood in front of a movie camera, but he also speaks words of wisdom to which everyone would be wise to pay attention. Links to the description of the article, to the Washington Free Beacon article, to the thread from it, to the Tablet Magazine article, to the thread from that, 4 tweets, a YouTube video, and an AZ quote in reaction to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlions.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and a link to that clip by Morgan Freeman from 60 Minutes. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.